Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last show before hockey is back on ice. We are just days away from the full preseason schedule starting. And of course, that means the Toronto Maple Leafs will be going against the team that they last played in a certain Game 7 that we're not going to talk about anymore, the Montreal Canadiens, on Saturday night. It is back, but we did have rookie camp, we had development camp going on, so we've got lots to talk about on this show. But as the players are coming back, we're starting to hear a few different things, and the old Prof, Jim Parsons, who's going to be speaking with us first on this one, he picked up something about maybe it's the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the world at this point. If you can kind of explain that, Jim.
Well, the first thing I noticed was at the interviews when they shut the season down last year after the Game 7 loss. In an interview, a perfunctory interview, Matthews was asked a question by a media person, do you think it's time to trade Marner? And he just sort of looked at the guy like, he didn't react in any way, but he said, we love each other in this room. we are together here. And then he said, that's just your outside noise. You have fun with that, I think was his phrase. Have fun with that. And I started to see that. And just last week at Marner's sort of charity tournament and dinner, he was asked questions about how he feels about the season. And they were disappointed and they spoke about their disappointment. But one thing Marner did say during that interview was that he really sees the rest of what's going on as outside noise. And those are the two things he mentioned, outside and noise, which really mentioned some of the things that Matthews talked about in that one interview, outside noise. And I read that Marner had been speaking with Matthews more regularly than normal during the off season. They talked to each other to commiserate. What I'm trying to figure out and what I think is happening is that after that interview with Matthews and more recently over the summer, there's been such vitriol about Marner's work. The fans simply don't like him and he's feeling it. And now he's talking to Matthews about it. And Matthews, I can only imagine what those conversations are. They said they talked about game techniques and how to get better and those sort of things, situations, but they also talked and counseled each other about the stuff. Those two young fellows, those two stars are feeling put upon by the fans to a greater degree than I've ever seen the fans put upon other people. Now, so what, you say? Here's what I think. We know that there's a window before Matthews' contract gets ended. We know that Arizona is, I'm wondering, I'm going with this story. I'm wondering if the fans are pushing the two players out of Toronto. And that's the fear I have, that people's desire to get Marner out of town and trade him is also going to push Matthews out of town. I'm wondering if they're setting up an instance where the two players are going to leave town simply because they don't feel at home with the fans.
It's a good point. And we saw it right away with Zach Hyman. When he didn't come back, he's a hometown guy. We thought maybe he would take a discount, and he saw the hate, he saw the jersey burning, everything else, and he didn't come back. And does that mean the next guys are going to be leaving as soon as they can as well? And I also saw a quote from Matthews along the lines of, we believe in ourselves. It doesn't matter if it's only a 30 people in this room or the 50 people in the organization that believe in us. That's all that matters. Like they're just, inside. But I think at the same time, a lot of this has to do with there hasn't been the crowd. There hasn't been the cheering for this team. They haven't heard the positive feedback. That all they've seen is the really nasty stuff that's online. Peter, what do you think of the old Prof's suggestion on this one?
I mean, I hate to say this, it's very possible. I mean, look at the fan base and look at what Toronto's dealt with for years. I mean, I get the frustration. I get the fact that, we want to see this team succeed and be at their best. We have two perennial all-star players on this team. And because a certain portion of the fan base are just pissed off about the performance of Matthews and Marner, you want to push them out. Like, we have something really great going on here. And I get it. You want them to succeed. But at the same time, it took a while. And I know we mentioned this before. It took a while for the Capitals to find success. It took a while for the Tampa Bay Lightning to have the success that they're having right now. And they had better rosters than the Maple Leafs or equal to them at one point. So I say just tone it down, because the majority of the fan base does love Matthews. They do love Marner. I get everyone's the sticking point with Marner is the contract, and I get that. It may not add up. But let's face it, he was playing like a $10 million player this year in the regular season. No, it doesn't equate to the playoffs, but you know what? I think they're going to use this as motivation. And I think they want to stick it to the rest of the fan base, saying that, you know what, you're going to doubt us? Okay, well, we're going to prove you wrong. And I think this is the year. And seeing Marner's with his shot and his skill set early on in the outset of the early portion of like the optional skating and scrimmages, he looked fantastic. And I said he looked like a different player than he was last year. So I'm hoping that they stay for the long haul. They stay as a Maple Leaf forever. And that they tell the naysayers, hey, you were wrong about us.
I did a story this week on Marner and how he pulled out the Champagne Poetry lyrics. Mm-hmm. And he didn't just put the new Drake song behind his workout. He picked specific lines that had a lot of message in those. And a lot of it was addressing the haters and how much he is worth. And I also think Dubas said it well this week when he said that all the people that are hating on these guys right now, they'll be the biggest boosters pretty soon too, that they were behind them the whole time. Alex, you've got the last word on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, Prof and Peter both pretty much nailed it on the head. I don't think the Leafs or their stars anyways are ever going to be at the point where they don't feel at home with the fans, because I think at the same time, while yes, they probably have been hearing a lot of flack over the summer, I think they understand that they're playing in arguably the most passionate market the NHL has to offer. And when you combine that with the fact that it's a market that has not seen any actual success since 1967, and when I say actual success, I obviously mean a Stanley Cup, you're going to get a lot of fans that will make knee-jerk assumptions, and they'll say things and they'll lash out. And I think they understand that, especially Marner having grown up in the Toronto area. And like you said, Kevin, that Dubas quote that you cited on how the biggest haters will end up being the ones giving them the most motivation. I fully agree with that. I think they're going to take that. They're going to take that hate and they're going to use it as motivation. And whether or not they can use it to their advantage in the playoffs and finally crush the narrative that they can't get it done when it matters is up to them. But it'll be interesting to see the path that they take to get there.
I think it's a lot of hard work for them, though. I mean, Kevin's point about and I don't know popular music, but Kevin's point about them picking certain lyrics that shows I am worthwhile. Look at me, I am worthwhile. If that's what it was, I think it's hard work to pull yourself up all the time. I think it would be easier in another market, and I think they might see that as potential. I don't disagree at all, Alex, with what you're saying. I do think it's motivating, but at the end of the day, motivation and hard work and just doing your best, it has to be difficult when you're 23 and 24 years old to feel that way. I just can't get over being a teacher for so many years and just working with kids. They want to belong. They want to feel at home. And when you have certain people making them go to, hey, look at me, I'm good. Look at me, I'm good. When they know it in their head, but they don't know it in their heart. And that's a huge, I think, impact. And could it come to a point where they say, this is just too much work? living here and working here? Would it be better someplace else where there's not the pressure? Arizona, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still will go back to the thing where they've only been hearing the hate. And I really feel once the buildings are full of 20,000 people that are cheering for them, I live outside of the market. I live out west. That building, and when they come to Edmonton, when they are in Calgary, 60-70% is Toronto. Everyone's there an hour and a half before the game with all their Maple Leafs jerseys on. Everyone's watching the warm-ups. Like, they get love everywhere they go. They have not had that for a long time now. All they've got is the hate. And unfortunately, the hate is what comes through on the social media. But hopefully once the fans are back and they get the cheering again, they'll realize that there's a lot more love for these guys than there is for the hate.
I hope you're right.
This is the Maple Leafs Lounge, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. And we hope that you're following along on all of your favorite social media platforms, and head on over to thehockeywriters.com because hockey is back. And we've got so much to write about and so much to talk about. And please leave your comments on all of our articles so we can even have more to discuss. But there was lots to discuss this week if you're Peter Baracchini, because he loves watching the prospects and seeing where things go. And that's what's been going on in Leafland as development camp got underway with Haley Wickenheiser at the helm, and also some scrimmages going. So take us through that with a little bit of a recap, Peter.
Yeah, it was very, very, great week for the prospects. I mean, especially if you're Nick Robertson, he was the main standout. He was the one that everyone flocked to and wanted to get a good read on, considering that this is going to be now his second or third time at this camp, to further his development. And like you mentioned, Haley Wickenheiser was at the forefront, trying to, sort of pump the tires a little bit on him, but at the same time still promote his skill set and his awareness of what he has to offer as a prospect. But everything that he did during the camp, from this drills, being the first one to lead off, to the actual scrimmages itself, was just awe-inspiring at what he was able to do. He does not stop. He does not quit. And he's made like about 4 or 5 highlight reel plays alone during those scrimmages. In my article, I posted clips from the Maple Leafs Twitter, but there was one goal that specifically stood out for me where the play is about to exit the zone. He automatically just jumps in, rips the puck off the player, makes a nifty move around the defender, and just dekes out the goalie. That to me is everything that Nick Robertson wants to aspire to be that difference maker, to be that quick transitional player, and get a great scoring chance and even just have a major impact offensively. I think we saw that. We saw that even on the early outsets of the rookie tournament as well, where he did the exact same thing to set up a goal for Alex Steves before he left the mid-game due to an injury. But we're seeing everything that's on display for Nick Robertson right now. And, his confidence is at an all-time high. He's playing great right now in the rookie tournament. And I think it's going to carry forward into training camp.
Alex, any thoughts on what you saw at camp this week?
To be completely honest, I didn't have an opportunity to watch either of the games on Thursday or Friday, unfortunately. So I don't really have too much to take away from that. But from everything that I saw on social media, it seems like, as expected, Nick Robertson is doing a hell of a job. And I do want to highlight Haley Wickenheiser again because, I'd say probably once a year, whenever development camp rolls around, I remember that Haley Wickenheiser works for the Leafs, and I'm like, this is really cool. It's really, really cool to have her behind the bench, and maybe not during the regular season, but at least working with the prospects and working in that developmental role. And I always like it. I always like kind of paying attention to development camp because it's kind of cool to see the prospects that didn't get drafted that are really, really out there working their tail off, hoping to earn a contract. And obviously, Peter mentioned a couple of guys like that, Alex Steves being one of them, James Hardy, who unfortunately was injured. There are definitely a couple of names to keep an eye on, but so I like what I see so far. And I know the Leafs do have some prospects that are playing over in Europe right now. So we didn't have the opportunity to see them at development camp, but I would say that from what we've seen so far, it's definitely been intriguing. And I think there's some real hidden talent there.
All right. Cameras down again, but I can tell you I'm still good looking. I should say that I mean that this is Dr. Haley Wickenheiser that we're talking about as well. Because one of the coolest things I saw about Dr. Wickenheiser was after she was at camp, she went and worked an ER shift that night. Like, awesome, just awesome.
Yeah.
Jim, I know you're watching the games right now. You're reviewing them for your next articles. What are you seeing?
I see a lot of good things. It strikes me that there are a couple players that I hadn't seen before, and honestly, you're looking at an old guy, but there's one player, and I can't remember his name, who's so tall. He's just such a huge guy. Curtis Douglas, and he really looks he really looks interesting player. And I think Hellickson as a defenseman has looked good as well. And so some of the players that I had never heard of before, I had to look these guys up. I had no idea who they were. So that was fun. And I agree with what's been said so far. I like Haley Wickenheiser working for the Leafs. She's so well respected by the young players. And even the way Steve's talked about her in an interview was just amazingly Steve's is so smart, by the way. He's really a smart kid. And, you listen to him in the interviews, he's just bright and able to engage. And I like his intelligence. I think he's going to be a keeper that way. And the Maple Leafs seem to pull people who have had 4-year university degrees, or in Steve's case, 3-year, going to business school at Notre Dame. These are smart kids. And I think that's been a draft choice that they've made to draft and pull in some very intelligent young men. And I think that'll make a difference over the long haul as well.
That says a lot for Steve's, coming from our very own old prof.
Yeah.
University professor right there, giving it to Mr. Steve's. So let's move along, because there's so many players that I was surprised by this week's announcement of Nikita Gusev has signed a professional tryout and will be in camp. So you've got another forward. There's a lot of forwards. But anyway, I guess competition's good. Alex, you've been diving into this one a little bit. What are you seeing with this situation?
Yeah, so the signing of Gusev to a PTO definitely caught me off guard, because when I think of PTOs, I normally think of guys that obviously you're looking to create some more competition in camp. So you take a couple darts, you throw them at the wall, and you hope that one of them hits the bullseye. And Nikita Gusev does not strike me as the type of player that you would bring in just to, maybe see what he can do, sign him to league minimum, bury him on the fourth line, and then get rid of him after a year. That is normally what you see from players on PTOs. And truthfully, this year, I didn't think the Leafs were going to offer any PTOs, because I think they've already got, like you said, Kevin, way more than enough forwards to deal with. They've got everybody from the veterans like Wayne Simmons to the tough guys like Curtis Gabriel to the Marley players like Nick Robertson. And then you've got all the guys who are expected to be on the team like Bunting, Richie, Kasha, Kampf, all these guys. So they're obviously well stocked up front. But the thing with Gusev that really intrigues me is the fact that he could, if the Leafs were to sign him, it almost seems like he would slot instantly into the top 6. Either that or they just don't sign him. Because Nikita Gusev is not a very good defensive player, not very good in his own end, and he is not a physical player either. So having said that, the year that he made his NHL debut, if you remember, he had a ton of hype coming over from the KHL. And the year that he made his debut, he was on pace for 55 points before COVID shut down the season. And he didn't have a good season this past year because he was skating under Lindy Ruff, who plays a little bit different of a system than the one John Hines had the year before. And so he may have had some trouble adjusting to that system. So I'm really, really intrigued to see how he does under Sheldon Keefe and how he does in training camp, because again, I don't see a situation where the Leafs bring him in on a 1-year league minimum contract and bury him on the fourth line, because he does have top 6 potential. He's one of the more talented forwards there. And it'll be interesting to see what he makes of his opportunity at training camp, because I feel like it's either boom or bust for him.
The interesting thing on guys that were available so late is why. were they available so late? What are other teams? Why are they taking a pass on these guys? That's what I always wonder about. And we certainly don't need another speedy forward. So who knows? But also with PTOs, they can be signed now at any time to a full-time deal. So this is giving the other 31 teams a look at a player that they can come in and scoop. So Peter, how does that situation work right now when there's already so many forwards in the system?
It just creates more competition, and I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for him. It's a good thing for everybody else, because they're not going to be handed the position. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you don't expect that to happen, but in the case if you're Nick Ritchie, Michael Bunting, Nick Robertson, Nikita Gusev, all these players eyeing for that top 6 left wing spot, there's only 2 spots up for grabs, and I don't see Nikita Gusev being a very good player. Well, he could be a good player in a depth role, but given how Alex said, he's only one-dimensional with his high-flying offense, not very good defensively. So maybe is this a turning point where maybe he does try to focus on the defensive side of things and become an impact player on both sides? Because let's face it, the Maple Leafs were a really great defensive team last year. I mean, it didn't quite show that much. It was a couple of lapses in the playoffs, but overall in the regular season, they were one of the better teams. And hopefully, if Gusev does buy into the system, he does buy into the mentality that, hey, I can't just be thinking offense nonstop. Granted, he is a forward. He's got to come back and help out on the back check, and he's got to be aware of his positioning and his awareness and surroundings. So if he's able to do that, I think he has a very good shot. But like Alex mentioned in his piece, boomer bust, low risk, high reward kind of move. Personally, given the fact that, we have more established players or players that have made an impact at both levels, either AHL or maybe somewhat of a good impact at the NHL level, the fact that he's declined quite a bit, it is cause for concern for him, but he still has a good chance.
Jim, we'll give you a last word on this subject.
I go back to an interview with Alex Steeves. One of the things he said that was he wasn't drafted because his skating was so bad. Gusev's skating is not good. And that was why what's gone under the radar, I think, with the Maple Leafs is the coaching hires. They have hired some really strong coaches, and those coaches all have player development. I believe they're thinking we can take some of these players and we can turn them. We can have they can learn how to skate. And I'm again forgetting the name of the great skating coach that they have, but we can teach them how to skate. We can teach them how to work. And Steeves has come from a nothing to a somebody simply because his skating has been so good. He really in the camp he kept up with Nick Robertson when his skating seemed to be poor before. If you have a kid who can't skate, who has great skills offensively, and this is the PTO they just signed, you think over the course of a year they can turn him into a good skater? I think that's what they're thinking. I think we have the player development staff. We can take some of these diamonds in the rough and we can shake some of them free from the problems that they have and turn them into better players. That's why I think they added so many good player development coaches to the team this year. There's no salary cap on coaches. There is a salary cap on players. And the Maple Leafs have great coaching staff. And I think that's gone under the radar.
2 quick notes before we move on. First of all, Jim, Barb Underhill is the name you were looking
for. Barb Underhill,
thank you. Of the skating coach, yeah. And second of all, the reason that I said that he is either top 6 or bust is because he has the talent. He was a commodity like that in the KHL, and the reason I think he does have that chance to slide into the top 6 is solely because the Leafs have that position wide open right now. I think with Zach Hyman in the mix last year, it wouldn't have been so clear cut, but we've had this discussion a million times between Bunting and Nick Ritchie and Kasha and Mikheyev even, who would challenge for a spot in that top 6. And if we're speaking strictly in terms of raw talent, Gusev probably has more than the other guys listed, but you're right. He is going to have to buy into the system, and he's going to have to improve his defensive game a little bit. I don't think they'll bring him on if he doesn't, but that's basically where I was bringing my whole boomer bust thing from. right there.
Well, the fact is, wasn't he the 2018 MVP in the KHL? Wasn't he the leading scorer in the KHL that year?
He was.
He has some talent.
We need to start paying more attention to the KHL. I've noticed that there seems to be more going on there than we've noticed in the past. I'm not sure if the talent is picking up, if maybe the coaching and development's picking up in the KHL, but it seems like a lot more is going on over there. And we saw that with Amirov too. He came into camp last week and he looks great. And he was middle of the road season last year in the KHL, but he looks really good at that development camp.
The thing with Amirov last year, he was getting bottom 6 minutes, and usually at the KHL level, even if you are a really highly touted prospect, you're going to get the brunt end at the time. Even a player like Danila Yurov for 2022, who I'm high on, has been getting very minimal minutes in the KHL. So the fact that now that Amirov is getting the top 6 minutes, getting the minutes that he's supposed to be playing, he's going to show his true potential at the KHL, and it's definitely going to go well for him.
I cite this every single time I do an article on a European prospect, Peter. It's unfair to look at prospects production in Europe because the reality is European pro teams do not care about using their teams as sort of like a development stage for prospects for NHL teams. They're concerned about icing the best roster possible. They want to play the best players in the best situations. And if it means giving their young guys fourth line minutes, they'll do it. So it's never good to judge their point totals while they're rookies playing on pro teams.
And despite the poor production, their play is still phenomenal despite the minimal minutes. So I totally agree with you.
Maybe that's why we see so many names come up during the draft that we've never heard of that are over in Europe. And then when you look at their numbers, you go, what? There's nothing spectacular here. But that's why you pay the scouts to see that, they're not scoring every time, but when they get those 4 to 7 minutes of ice time, they're elite and going to be elite. So, yeah. All right. So last one is, as always, I get into a little bit of hot water because I kind of take more of the role. And I put on this week that this is weird for me because we're going into a training camp and Frederik Andersen is not there. He's been a mainstay for 5 years. I know that there were struggles. I know all the situations. We don't need to beat that dead horse, but this is also the first time in a long time when we go into training camp and we just the net's not solid. And as I said in my article, that's nothing against Jack Campbell. I know he is the most excellent man on the planet and we need more Jack Campbells in this world. So I'm not being negative about Jack. I hope him the best for sure. Just in my view, it's like, this is kind of weird that we're going in and there's some questions in that. And I just look back on last season as both of the goalies that are now in the Leaf crease had injuries last year. And it was a weird year last year. I just feel like there's a lot of question in net that there's a lot of confidence there, but is the confidence misplaced because of such a strange year last year and also some injuries and all those things? So that's where the article went. There was a rebuttal from one of our other writers as well, saying that the Leaf net is great and is in good shape, best shape it's been in years, and that could be true as well. That's just where the things stand right now. Is, to me, it's an unknown. So who wants to start the bashing on me on this one?
Well, I'm not gonna bash you, but what I will say is that while Mrazek did miss most of the season last year, his injury was a freak one. I think he had someone step on his thumb or something like that. So he had to get thumb surgery. So I'm not overly concerned about that injury. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too, is that while there are certainly questions because the Leafs do not have their bona fide number one to look to in Freddie Andersen like they did in years past, I think it's also worth remembering that both of the guys competing for a job this year have had very, very much success in recent years, regular season success anyways, but they've proven to be good goalies. And while the injury concerns are there, I think what helps that situation is the fact that the Leafs aren't going to be asking either of them to take on a Freddie Anderson like workload. I'd be concerned if we were looking at one of those guys to be the number one goalie, and you had to look at Jack Campbell and ask 60 games of him, or look at Peter Mrazek and ask for 60 games of him. But I think the fact that they've got two capable goalies in between the pipes, and at most, if they end up splitting starts, that's 40 starts per goalie. And I think that's a workload that both of those goalies can handle over a full 82 games. So there is a question there because they don't have that go-to number one guy like they have in the past 5 years with Freddie. But I do think that they'll be able to make it work. And I don't think the injuries will be quite as much of an issue as people may seem to believe.
Peter?
Yeah, Alex nailed it on the head. Either they're going to go for like a really balanced split between the two, or maybe if they see more promise in either Jack Campbell or Peter Mrazek, maybe do a 50-32 kind of split where if they feel one is more worthy of being the starter, they're going to give them slightly more minutes and slightly more starts. But like Alex said, we have two really capable goalies, and I'm going to draw a comparison to back when it was James Reimer and Jonathan Bernier battling it out for the crease, where James Reimer looked really well as a starter for 1 year. Jonathan Bernier comes in. I'm thinking maybe his confidence was a little bit of a shot because of the fact that he got the team to the playoffs. The team in front of him sort of, checked out in the playoffs in that third period. And they go out and get another starter, one that's not really as established as him, even though it's a small sample size. Jack Campbell had a small sample size, but he played relatively well, and he had a better team in front of him than James Reimer. Peter Mrazek, we all know about the Carolina Hurricanes, solid team in front of him. The defense is remaining intact. So both Campbell and Mrazek have that stability and strong defensive structure in front of them where they're able to not worry as much or panic and be the one that's going to be standing on their head most of the time. So if they do try to go with that 1A, 1B split like they did with Bernier and Reimer, it's going to be a different outcome because these are already established players, as Alex mentioned. And the fact that the defense is better than ever, we only lose Zach Bogosian, but you still have your top four intact. I think this is going to be a really successful tandem. Granted, like you said, that there are going to be some doubts and some questions still linger, but I think that it is in a better spot than where we were last year or even the year before.
The one point that I made in the article that you just reminded me of is why did Carolina take Anderson over Mrazek? And that's
or even Nedeljkovic for that matter.
Right. And it's like when Babcock came to the Maple Leafs, he said a line because that's when Phaneuf was public enemy number one. And he said a line that as a coach, he never says anything about a player until he's actually coaching them. Because the guy that's coaching them knows a lot more about what's going on and what they mean to the team. Mm-hmm. So why did they let Mrazek go then is kind of my question when I'm looking at that. So Jim, you've been talking a lot about the coaching during the show. Does that raise a red flag for you that the coaches went with Anderson over Mrazek in Carolina after they had a great year where they only fell 2 points off of the President's Trophy?
I never thought of it until you said that, to be truthful. I was more thinking, so really I put that question aside. Now we'll talk what I know about a bit. I was more thinking that what we're looking at is a philosophical change in the way goalie should be employed. And I think this is the first season that Keefe has been able to do that. This will be the first full season Keefe has coached. So we're going to see his impact on the team. And I think that was a choice that they made to do that. I don't know why Mrazek might have not been the choice. Every place I followed him, he's been great. With the Red Wings, he was good. With Carolina, he seemed good to me. He has a nice personality. I mean, he'll get along. He certainly knows his place and wants to be a tandem. That's a good thing from my perspective. So I don't know the answer to your question, Kevin. It's a good question. But I do like the choice that they've made to deploy their goalies differently, because I think, as Peter said, it sort of mediates against any potentially huge injury and everything falls to hell in a handcart, right? So I think that's what we're seeing here is a move towards hedging your bets on the stuff. Some person might shine, some person might get more, but I think it is a 1A, 1B tandem.
Right. Well, thank you very much for all of your opinions and comments that we talked about here this week. And as always, make sure that you leave your comments and your feedback, raise some topics that you'd like for us to discuss here in the Maple Leafs Lounge. And like we said, it's hockey. Hockey is back. So it's been a long off season. All we've been talking about is the off ice stuff. Now we can get into the on ice stuff. It's going to be great. So we hope that you join us again next week where we get to talk on ice hockey. Until then, have a great week.
Mm-hmm.